Hey everyone, Dave Greco here and welcome back to the channel. So we're gonna hop over to the commentary and time lapse in just a second here. But we're gonna be creating a brand new OC today and I'm pretty excited about this one. So we're basically starting with kind of no idea where I wanna go with it. And so I'm gonna show kind of that creation process as I sketch the lines and try to figure out as we go. And then we're going to evaluate at the end what's working, what's not working, and where do we go from here. So let's not waste any more time and hop right over. So as we get started here, I want to give a quick introduction to who I am for anyone that might be new to the channel. I'm a concept artist that has been working in the game industry for over 20 years now, which is kind of crazy. I'm currently a senior concept artist on the World of Warcraft team over at Blizzard Entertainment, and this channel is a way of showing my process and just helping as many artists as I can out there looking to break into the industry or just get a leg up on their art in general. So with any new sketch and I not having like a big idea of kind of what I want to do, I start with a lot of crazy loose lines. In this sketch, I'm also using my brush, DG Main. I basically use that brush for about 95% of everything. That brush is actually available down in the description. There's a link to it if you're interested in checking it out. But I sketch with it, I paint with it, I render with it, everything. So right now, I'm basically just looking for like a lot of kind of loose dynamic lines and trying to figure out a pose. Even if the pose is weird and doesn't make sense, I just want to keep my hand moving. You know, I really don't want to slow down. I want to focus on anything. And I'm kind of letting that process show me what might be interesting or what I can kind of move on to. And there's so many characters that I design that kind of start this way. And as I build and build, I create new ideas and then I try to take that character in that direction. And so that's pretty much what we're doing here. I like to keep the camera pretty zoomed out on the canvas so I can see a lot of it. And I'm not afraid just to move things around, copy and paste, warp it, shift it. You know, you're not married to anything. Like this thing could be completely put to the side. We start a new one. You never know. So really, I'm looking for just kind of like loose ideas on where I might want to take her outfit. Looking for some interesting shapes to place around. Whether it be like straps, shoulder pieces, the way a vest or skirt may lay across the leg, how baggy her pants are, you know, what we might want to do with the hair. My wife has suggested this kind of French bob, which I thought would look pretty cool. Most of my characters have like very long hair. And so sometimes I try to force myself to give some short hairstyles once in a while. But I think the next one we may have to go long again. So, you know, I'm basically just trying to pencil in, trying to clear it up a little bit. It can get so messy, my sketching, that it's hard to figure out what's going on. And so usually with that, I'll just drop the layer back, drop the opacity on it just a little bit, and then just start creating some line work on top. Like I'm always a big fan of line work. Some people work in shape and color. Some people love line. I love both. You know, I grew up being a huge comic fan in inking. A lot of my childhood was just with my pen. I love just doing ink work. So line and sharp line is still very important to me in my work, even if a lot of it gets rendered out in the end. I like to leave it in little spots if I can. And so this is giving my brain a little bit of permission to slow down and try to figure out shapes just a little bit. You know, try to figure out some objects that might be working from the sketchy mess that I created. You know, what can we figure out that kind of create a uniform? Maybe I'll fix the eye placement, try to fix some of the anatomy, especially when I'm starting the starting head sketch. A lot of the placement of everything may not be super accurate, you know, of like where the ear is or the eye compared to the other eye, because I just want to keep my hand moving. That's always something I know I can fix in the future. So I'm also going to create a lot of these time lapses with no music in the background. Feel free to play your own music in the background or just have this up while you're working during the day. Maybe it's something to listen to and get have a little art knowledge on the side. Hopefully this helps. And so same thing, I'm going around and I really want to see how I can affect the silhouette and the shapes around the edges. That's always super important to me. How do I break apart the shapes on the arm, on the waist, on the legs to give it more interest? And that's going to be theme carried through as we create this character. is how do we figure out parts of her design and outfit that make her unique, stand out, and that might be a little bit different. And that's something that takes me a long time with certain stages to kind of make a character feel unique, where sometimes they may start a little generic, or where you would expect to put a prop or an object. And so we can figure out little things that tell a story about this character. I'm starting to have in my head that she's this like time traveling agent, and she's kind of exiting through a portal. And so it'd be cool to kind of figure out a location where she might be exiting through. I have this idea of like this very pixelated portal design, which might be kind of neat. And so there's a lot of things around her neck. She's got this like necklace of different objects, of vials and gems, and that could be tied into her character, maybe her past. We can look into things around her belt. I also have this idea of this kind of armband piece that kind of works as a time traveling device that kind of holds time, her clock. It's funny, I think a part of my idea for this, it came into my head the other day, is I used to be a huge Quantum Leap fan. I know that really does show my age, but I loved Quantum Leap, and Sam going back through time with Al and everything. So I think there was a part of that for this one, although she's not leaping into anybody, but going through these like little time portals. When I first started the design, I had this idea that she also powered it through this kind of staff that had this rotating top with crystals, and there was like a button on the bottom and a latch maybe around her hands. As you'll see later in the piece, I do end up getting rid of that. It just seemed really bulky for her design and personality. I think we can figure out something else later. But, it's worth putting in there. See if it works, see if it doesn't. It's the same thing if I tried a bunch of ideas, send it to a lead, send it to some art directors, just to get their input or feedback. And they could be like, this isn't working, let's try this. And those feedback rounds and iteration is what actually really, really makes a design. I love the iteration and feedback loops that I get over at Blizzard. The designs always come out better in the end. Getting just more eyes on it, more time to think about things and see where we can push, where we can retract is always super important. So you kind of see this like robot head coming through the portal. I was thinking of this kind of Al character that could be some type of android that was also coming through. And so I just kind of want to brush it in to keep the idea in my head. It looks a little large, and there's also something I noticed here, and you'll see me create like a red line at one point from both their faces, is that if I was going to have this android in the piece, their head and eye level are almost exactly lined up. And that is something you usually want to avoid. And so I'll try to move that around later. And so it's still the same thing. I'm trying to figure out areas where it's too noisy, where I want detail, and then I want to give a little bit of rest to your eyes as far as her arm and her vest. So it's not so complicated all over the place. That's usually why I leave sections that might seem like a little bit more blank, say like her arm, parts of her pants, so it's not completely busy from top to bottom. It's super important. You have to be able to find areas to give your eyes a rest. And we can keep knocking it down and figure out more basic ways to show things as we go forward to the design. And so today we're just going to be doing this entire design to this black and white, and then this will be a two-part series. The next one, we're going to take this into a full render in color, and we're going to be changing a ton of the details of how it all works, from like her gauntlet to belts to trim designs and to getting it all lined up so it all looks like part of the same character. That's something I tackle while rendering. And that's something we can discuss in the next one as well. And so I actually usually don't spend a ton of time in black and white, not as much as I used to these days, but I think it was important for a character like this one and to show where you're kind of just making up it on the spot and kind of seeing what comes from it. I don't really need to mess with color right now. We're just really trying to figure out the design. And it's much easier just to worry about the value, what's reading, what's not reading, and then we can keep changing shapes, designs all over the place, really easy, keeping it messy. And so I don't mind staying in the black and white for that for now. And this is a great stage too, where, I'm constantly trying to figure out what works silhouette wise. And this is also a good reminder to be constantly flipping your canvas. You notice me flipping my canvas like crazy. I have it set to Control F. That's just something I've had it hotkeyed for years, and so I didn't really think about it. But it's a great brain reset for you, right? It's one of those times, one of those things where, you're working on a painting all night, you go to sleep, and you wake up in the morning and you look at it and you're like, wow, I didn't notice how twisted or distorted this looked, or how this isn't working right. Your brain got like a complete reset over the night, and you're looking at it with fresh eyes so you can evaluate it properly. Flipping your canvas is basically giving your brain reset, sometimes to like a lesser degree than getting like a real solid break from looking at the piece, but it's a great way for you to do some quick reevaluations. So constantly flip. I remember when I first started my career, I had a bad habit of just flipping at the end and then trying to fix. And that never worked out great. You're basically just trying to stop the characters and look like they're going to slide off the page. So flip early, flip often. It's super worth it. I try not to go super crazy. You see some artists that are flipping every 3 seconds, and it can be a little jaunting. So right now, I'm just trying to get a lot of the dark line out of the hair. I know she's going to have this kind of light pink blondish hair. And so I want to get rid of a lot of those kind of dark line values just so I can see how it's going to relate to the rest of her design. And that's constantly something we can tweak going forward too. And I know this hair does get tweaked a lot. And so this is actually a pretty fun stage in the painting where you have like this really loose base done, and then you can really kind of start worrying about what the outfit is and what more of her story is. Something that even looking at this for the commentary, it'd be nice to push the face more. I try to avoid some kind of generic poses that I used to do, or, like she's not kind of a message she's trying to get across visually. And so that's something I try to focus on lately. And that comes across even with everything about her outfit. Make sure certain trim thickness and details match across the board. And even say like the belt buckle kind of shape design where they kind of curve in and out. How do I carry that through to the rest of the pieces of gear so it doesn't look so hodgepodge? I like to have a bit of consistency, and I know that's something that's actually very important creating characters for World of Warcraft as well, is that kind of consistent design across the board. And I think it makes a big difference. And so we're actually just have to spend a bit of time going forward on her arm time bracelet band as well. Yeah, so basically I'm going around and I just really want to clean up a lot of these little kind of messy shapes and areas. Putting that value in, where does it all kind of work? And then just kind of, I'm still just bouncing around. I really don't want to get super focused on any of it. I know there's going to be some changes to the shoulder pad on her shoulder that is facing away from us. I thought about putting more tech on that arm. And so I really like getting some nice asymmetry in the character. But that's something we're gonna have to keep tweaking with and see what works and what doesn't. I didn't really like that Android design. It felt too large. I wanted something that probably felt smaller in the future. Kind of felt like the same size as she was. I don't think that's super great for the design. I like to have that kind of difference. So right there, you can just see so much of the DG main brush just splattered all over the place, really pressing hard to get those like thick squares. It's going to come across in this idea later of this kind of pixelated portal that she's coming through. And so that's what's great about doing some of these sketches too, is finding out the story as you go. That is not something I even came close to thinking of when starting the sketch, but just seeing how it kind of comes together, gives you more ideas, gets kind of that dialogue going in your head. And that's perfect. That's why it's great, even if you don't know what to sketch and you're looking at a blank piece of paper, is if you can just start something and spend 20, 30 minutes on something, I think you'd be amazed at kind of what ideas get generated. And then you're kind of off to the races. And then you're just drawing, you're just painting. And like many of you know, just being lost in that process is honestly one of the best feelings in the world. It's when you're completely lost and drawn into your painting, into your world, into the details, and there's nothing else that you want to do but just spend more time in it. That's fantastic. And that, I think that's what's always so addicting about creating art, is that sense of being absorbed into it during its creation process. You know, the creating a final and having it done, that kind of appreciation you have for it at the end is, I find, very fleeting. It lasts momentarily, but the true joy of painting and drawing is being in the thick of it during the creation process. That's where all the fun is had. It's where you really confine yourself and just completely disappear. And that's always been one of my favorite parts. So right here, I know I was trying to get some more shapes and ideas figured out. I'm really not happy with where it is now. Having like a rag strap over the top of this clock piece doesn't really make a lot of sense. I don't like the design of it. We're gonna rework that later, but it wasn't worth me kind of spending a lot of time on now. That's definitely something that's gonna need to rework. And so even like the hand stuff, I'm not too worried about like, where are the knuckles? Are these like perfect fingers? I'm just getting a general idea. And I know for this foreground hand, I had this idea that our fingers were kind of cresting on the edge of the portal, but it didn't really make sense with her hand that's coming forward, where the portal would be behind her. So I know we end up changing that later too. Her backhand kind of having the same effect. And so I like having a little bit of a messy background as I work on the character. I'm not usually a fan of just working on a completely white or gray background. You know, it's different for certain situations. Like if I had to do just a character for the team, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the background stuff, since it's just a drawing or painting that needs to get sent over to a modeler. So time is super important in how much time you spend on something. And so it's actually this kind of love I have lately for just getting these kind of like abstract shapes around, and then also see kind of what that does for me as far as ideas go. You know, these kind of like patches of lighter value on the pants. I'm not saying there's actually patches on it, but there's something that kind of breaks it up, but doesn't add a lot of contrast. And it just makes it like a little visually interesting. And this goes back to the silhouette before. I wasn't really happy with how this kind of bottom cloak, cape, bottom tunic thing, whatever it's going to be, was laying. And I wanted to really make sure that I was showing properly kind of where her legs were, where one leg was coming forward and the other one was going back into the portal. And so, you know, sometimes it's worth just erasing it, get that bottom structure down, and then lay your clothing and design on top of it. You know, that bottom level anatomy has to be there and it has to make sense. Doesn't, you know, I don't think it has to be perfect, especially when you're doing more stylized characters, where sometimes like I like to purposely extend certain parts of the anatomy if like the thighs is like a little bit longer, or especially like sometimes I like to extend the distance from the shoulder to the elbow, small things. But there should be at least an understanding of how it should work before you kind of stretch some of these rules. And it's good to just make sure that it at least visually makes sense. And so I'll go back a bunch of times. There was constantly parts of the rear shoulder that I wasn't happy with. Like, even if it makes sense, like, do I like how it looks as a graphic shape? I'm still not 100% on it, and that's something we're going to tweak. And I've also kind of taught myself something in the past few years, that if something is bothering me about a part of the piece, don't ignore it. You know, it is worth the time to go back and figure it out until it feels right. Could take 8, 9, 15 different sketches on top, but it always seems worth it to me. You know, I used to always think about these stories of John Singer Sargent constantly scraping off a hand or fingers and repainting them multiple times till he got it to exactly where he wanted. You know, it's easy to look at a painting from another artist that you love and be like, oh man, they must have just sat down and they just ripped out a masterpiece, right? Without thinking about like how many iterations or studies or times it took to get to where they landed. And so you owe it to yourself to spend that time. If it doesn't look right, if it doesn't feel right, take a moment, stop. If you've got to shoot some reference, if you have to see how that fold actually works, then do it. It's going to help a ton. And I looked at a ton of portfolios at Lightbox this year where so many people's pieces could have benefited from those kind of small moments where something didn't look or feel right and you ask them about it. And it seems like a lot of artists, they kind of just moved on from it. They didn't want to spend the time to really tweak it or fix it. But it's those small things that make a huge difference, especially if you're applying to a studio. They really want to see that you have that eye for it, right? That like you can see when something's not right and you're taking the initiative to do something about it. I'm also going to extend the canvas at one point. I really hate how her legs going off the canvas. I don't like to hide any type of body parts or feet or anything. And I think it'll have more of an impact showing her kind of boot coming down onto the ground also. So I don't want to seem like she's floating, but that's something we'll extend the canvas later and figure that out in the next video probably. Yeah, so I think that's something major to think about, is just spend the time to do it. I think it's worth it. And I think at the end here, I had this other idea that she's got these like crazy keys. Like these keys right now look too generic and maybe too small, but where she's unlocking gateways and portals, and it's just, I don't know, something is coming into focus a little bit more for her design. And I think the keys could be a big part of it. Maybe part of it unlocks with her time device with these keyholes. I don't know, we could figure something out cool. Feel free to put any of those ideas down on where you could actually think of ideas or things we could add onto the character for the render. That'd be actually awesome. I'd love this to be more of a group project on the channel. For her, even some cool names. I don't have a name for her yet or anything. Or if she's just a rogue character, is she part of some like time agency? You know, who knows? We can go a lot of different directions. You know, we could even change her hair completely. We want to try different hairstyles on her with this pose. We can do long, we can do shorter. And so I just kind of airbrushed it out. It gets, you know, a little airbrushy looking right now, but I just want to get rid of some of the details because I just want to hop. This is about the stage where I want to start putting on color and figuring out the details. So that pretty much is going to get close to where we're wrapping up this sketch for today. I do want to get her little bot time traveler friend. You know, every character needs a cute little friend that goes with him. And so we need to aim for the bot as well, by the way. And yeah, so basically he's kind of coming through the portal. He's going to give her her mission details, just like Al from Quantum Leap. And basically, this is kind of where we landed. So this is actually the final sketch right here for the day. I actually kind of cropped it down and vignetted the piece. I want to have these kind of this value so her hair and skin kind of pop a little bit more off the back. And so yeah, so now we're gonna go from here. So the next video, I've already started laying some color down, but I have a ton of render to do. And so we're gonna be working on this week, and then hopefully we'll have the final to everybody next week. And then we can actually do a draw this in your own style. We'll put it up on Instagram, YouTube. It's gonna be awesome. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate everyone welcoming me back from the last video. It's been amazing. I'll see you in the next one.